There's something about the human conscience that simply won't let us rest when we know we've done something wrong. It's built into the very fabric of our being, woven into the essence of who we are. You see it in children before they even understand morality. When they take something that isn't theirs, their eyes dart around, their breathing changes. There's an unease, a subtle but undeniable discomfort. That doesn't come from nowhere. It's evidence of something much deeper, something ancient and universal, something divine. When people wrong you, whether they betray your trust, manipulate a situation, or cause harm in ways you never expected, there's an immediate temptation to believe that they're getting away with it, that they walk off scot-free while you're left to pick up the pieces. But that's not how this works. No one truly escapes the weight of their own conscience. It's one of the most inescapable forces in existence. And when God begins to deal with someone, he often starts there. At first, it may not look like much. They might go about their days as if nothing happened, pretending that they feel no remorse. But deep down, something shifts. Their thoughts aren't as clear as they used to be. Their rest isn't as peaceful. They may try to distract themselves, busying their minds with entertainment, numbing the discomfort with fleeting pleasures, but the gnawing sense of unease remains. And in the quiet moments when there are no distractions left, it catches up to them. That's the thing about divine conviction. You can't outrun it. It follows you into the silence, into the stillness, into the very places where you once sought comfort. Guilt has a way of creeping into the cracks of a person's soul, whispering reminders of what they've done. And it doesn't just affect the mind, it affects the body. You see it in the tension they carry, the stress etched into their faces, the way they avoid looking certain people in the eye. Their restlessness manifests in their choices, their actions, their words. They become defensive, irritable, even paranoid, as if deep down they know that the weight of their actions will eventually catch up to them. This is why you don't have to chase vengeance. You don't have to become bitter, plotting ways to make them feel the pain they caused you. That's not your burden to bear. What's happening inside them is already far more powerful than anything you could orchestrate. And that's because real justice isn't just about punishment. It's about revelation. It's about forcing someone to face the truth of who they've become, to reckon with the reality of their choices. And that reckoning always comes. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in the way you expected, but it comes. Think about the people who have done wrong throughout history, those who climbed their way to the top through deception or cruelty. How many of them truly lived in peace? How many of them found genuine joy? More often than not, they spent their days trying to drown out the voices in their heads, running from the very thing they refused to confront. Because that's the price of wrongdoing. It fractures you. It divides the mind against itself. And when God places conviction on someone's heart, that division only grows stronger. Now, some people will ignore it. They'll fight it, suppress it, convince themselves they've done nothing wrong. But the thing about suppressing guilt is that it doesn't disappear. It just festers. It seeps into every aspect of their lives, affecting their relationships, their choices, their sense of self. And over time, it begins to unravel them. The people around them will start to notice. Maybe they seem more anxious, more easily agitated. Maybe they suddenly withdraw, distancing themselves without explanation. That's not an accident. That's the weight of conviction pulling at them, forcing them to wrestle with the consequences of their actions. And here's the most fascinating part. Often, the very people who hurt you the most will begin to see you in their thoughts, not with indifference, but with unease. Your presence, your name, even the memory of what happened, it will surface in moments they least expect. Not because you're seeking revenge, but because their own conscience won't let them forget. And that's not just psychology at work. That's divine justice moving through the unseen realms of the human soul. So when you wonder whether they feel anything, whether they've been affected at all, understand this: God does not let people walk away from their actions unchanged. He will deal with them in ways you may never see, in battles they will have to fight within themselves. Your job is not to carry their burden, not to hold on to anger, not to wait for the day they admit their wrongs. Your job is to trust that justice is unfolding, even when it's invisible to you. Because at the end of the day, no one outruns the weight of truth. It always catches up. And when it does, it doesn't just remind, it transforms. It breaks down false illusions, shatters the lies we tell ourselves, and forces us to stand before the mirror of who we truly are. And in that moment, when the restlessness becomes too much to bear, they will have to make a choice: to continue running or to finally face what they've done. There's something profound about the way life operates, something precise, almost mathematical, yet deeply spiritual at the same time. You can't build your life on dishonesty, manipulation, or cruelty and expect it to remain stable. There are consequences, not always immediate, not always visible at first, but consequences nonetheless. And one of the first things to slip away when someone has done wrong, when they've hurt, betrayed, or deceived, is peace. That internal stability, that quiet assurance that everything is in order, that they are walking in alignment with what is good and right, it vanishes. People often assume justice must be visible, that they need to see with their own eyes the downfall of those who have wronged them. But that's not how it works. The loss of peace isn't something you can always witness from the outside, but it's happening all the same. They might still smile, still move through life, still pretend that nothing has changed, but inside, a storm is brewing. There is a fracture within them, and no matter how much they try to suppress it, they can feel it. The foundation they thought was so secure, it begins to crack. You see, peace isn't just the absence of conflict. It's the presence of alignment. It's knowing that your actions, your choices, your very being are in harmony with something greater than yourself. It's what allows a person to sleep at night without being tormented by their own thoughts, to wake up with a sense of purpose rather than dread. And when someone has acted against that order, when they've hurt another person without remorse, when they've chosen selfishness over integrity, that alignment is disrupted. It's subtle at first. Maybe they feel a little more on edge, a little less sure of themselves. But then it grows. They start to lose the favor they once had, not just in material things, though that can happen too, but in the intangible ways that truly matter. They lose clarity, they lose confidence. The very doors that once opened effortlessly for them suddenly feel heavier, harder to push through. Relationships that once flourished now feel strained. Interactions that were once easy become awkward. It's as if something has shifted, as if the world no longer bends in their favor the way it once did. And it hasn't. Because when you align yourself with deceit, with harm, with injustice, you step out of the flow of what is good, and that has consequences. It's easy to think that someone can continue hurting others indefinitely, that their success proves they've escaped judgment. But what kind of success is it really? What kind of life can be built on the foundation of wrongdoing? There is no true joy in it, no real fulfillment. There's only the constant gnawing need to keep up the act, to run from the consequences, to silence the voice in the back of their mind telling them that things are slipping away. And slip away they will. Because here's the reality. The favor that once surrounded them, that wasn't theirs to keep. Favor is something given. It's something granted when you walk in truth, when you operate with integrity, when you choose what is right, even when it's difficult. And just as it is given, it can be taken away. You can't manipulate your way into lasting favor. You can't scheme your way into permanent success. What you build on dishonesty will crumble under its own weight. And when it does, they'll feel it. The very things they took for granted, the ease, the opportunities, the respect of those around them, will begin to erode, not all at once, but piece by piece. They'll wonder why things aren't working the way they used to, why their plans keep falling apart, why they suddenly feel like they're fighting against something unseen. That's what happens when you move outside of divine favor. You start working against the current rather than with it. And what's fascinating is that many people, when they find themselves in this position, won't immediately recognize what's happening. They'll blame circumstances, other people, bad luck, anything but themselves. But deep down, they know the truth is inescapable. You cannot do wrong and remain untouched by it. You cannot walk outside of integrity and expect your life to remain steady. What you sow, you reap. Not always in the way you expect, not always in the way that's immediately visible, but in ways that shape the very core of your existence. This is why you don't need to concern yourself with revenge, with trying to make sure justice is served, because it already is. The moment they chose wrongdoing, the moment they acted without regard for the consequences, the process had already begun. And that's not your burden to carry. You don't need to track their downfall, to wonder when they'll feel what they made you feel. Life has a way of taking care of that. What you need to do is focus on your own alignment, on your own path, on staying in the flow of what is good and true. Because while they are losing peace, while they are feeling the weight of what they've done, you are rising, you are growing, you are walking in a kind of favor they can no longer access. And that's the real justice. Not just that they face the consequences of their actions, but that you are no longer bound by them. You are free. And in the end, that's more powerful than anything you could ever wish upon them. Life has a strange way of balancing the scales. It doesn't always happen immediately, and it certainly doesn't always happen in ways we expect. But when people act with dishonesty, cruelty, or selfishness, when they deliberately hurt others without remorse, they set something in motion, something they can't control, something that will eventually come back to them. At first, it may seem like they're moving forward without consequences. They might even appear to be thriving, getting the job they wanted, the relationship they desired, the recognition they craved, and you might sit there watching, wondering why life seems to reward those who do wrong. But what you have to understand is that not every victory is what it seems. Not every gain is a blessing. Sometimes the very things they thought would elevate them become the weight that drags them down. Because when someone has built their success on the pain of others, they have built it on unstable ground. And it's only a matter of time before cracks begin to form. Suddenly, things that once came easily start to fall apart. Their plans don't unfold the way they envisioned. The opportunities they relied on start slipping through their fingers. The people who once supported them begin to distance themselves. And the most unsettling part? They won't understand why. They won't connect the dots right away. They'll blame bad luck, misfortune, other people. They'll convince themselves that life is just unfair, that they are the victim of random setbacks. But deep down, if they're honest, they'll know. They'll know that the very energy they put into the world, the deception, the betrayal, the harm, they are now on the receiving end of it. It happens in ways that feel almost too precise to be coincidence. The business deal they counted on suddenly falls through. The relationship they manipulated their way into becomes a source of chaos. The power they craved becomes overwhelming, isolating, more than they can handle. And at first, they'll fight it. They'll try to regain control, to force things back into place. But no matter what they do, no matter how hard they push, the resistance remains. Because that's how this works. You don't get to walk through life treating people as disposable and expect the road ahead to stay smooth. You don't get to climb by stepping on others and expect the ground beneath you to stay firm. Eventually it catches up. Maybe not in the way you imagined, maybe not in the way you wanted to see, but in the way that matters most. And the most powerful part? You don't have to do anything to make it happen. You don't have to intervene. You don't have to force justice. You don't have to spend your time hoping for their downfall, because it's already happening. The weight of their own actions is already working against them, creating obstacles they can't escape, setbacks they can't predict. And while they are struggling, while they are watching their world unravel in ways they never saw coming, you are moving forward. You are healing. You are learning. You are becoming stronger, wiser, more resilient. Because while they were spending their time plotting, manipulating, and taking shortcuts, you were doing the hard work. You were building something real, something that can withstand the storms. So, when you wonder whether they will ever feel the weight of what they've done, understand this. Life has already set the course. You don't need to witness every moment of it. You don't need to be there when the realization dawns on them. Just know that it will. Because when you live out of alignment with truth, when you harm others for your own gain, when you think you can outsmart the very fabric of justice, the path ahead doesn't stay open for long. It narrows, it turns, it throws obstacles in your way that no amount of force can remove. And at some point they will have to face the truth. The road they are walking isn't leading where they thought it would. The very things they chased are slipping through their fingers, and they are the only ones to blame. People believe they can get away with things indefinitely, that if they just lie well enough, manipulate skillfully enough, control the narrative persistently enough, they can outrun the truth. And for a while it might seem like they can. They build illusions around themselves, carefully curated images, layers upon layers of deception. But here's the thing about truth. It has a way of surfacing. Not always immediately, not always dramatically, but inevitably. Because when someone acts without integrity, when they hurt others without accountability, when they think they can operate in the shadows forever, they forget one crucial reality. Nothing stays hidden forever. It's an ancient principle written into the very structure of existence. The longer you suppress the truth, the more pressure builds beneath the surface. And when that pressure reaches its limit, exposure isn't just possible, it's inevitable. It doesn't matter how much someone tries to cover their tracks, how much they manipulate perceptions, how much effort they put into keeping up appearances. Sooner or later, what they've done catches up to them. It might come in the form of a slip, a moment of carelessness, a contradiction they can't explain away. Or maybe it comes through another person, someone they underestimated, someone who saw more than they realized. Maybe the very people they thought they had control over decide they won't be silent anymore. And once the unraveling begins, it happens fast. The mask starts to slip. The carefully constructed version of themselves begins to crack. And when people start to see them for who they truly are, the power they thought they had, the influence, the respect, the authority vanishes. Because deception only works for as long as people believe it. The moment they don't, the whole structure collapses. The alliances they built on lies begin to dissolve. The people they manipulated no longer trust them. Their words lose their weight. And what they worked so hard to protect, their reputation, their control, their sense of superiority, becomes the very thing that crumbles first. And here's what's really interesting. Many times, they won't even see it coming. They become so convinced of their own invincibility, so confident that they've outmaneuvered everyone else, that they miss the signs of their own downfall. They don't notice when people start whispering, when questions start being asked, when the gaps in their story start to show. And by the time they realize what's happening, it's too late. That's the nature of accountability. It doesn't just knock gently at the door, it breaks it down. And when it arrives, there is no escape. They are left to face what they've done, not on their own terms, not with the ability to control the outcome, but in the full light of day, where everyone can see. And that's why you don't have to waste your energy chasing after justice, trying to force people to answer for what they've done. You don't have to be the one to expose them. Life has a way of taking care of that. It always does. It may take time, longer than you'd like, but it happens. Because when someone chooses deception over honesty, when they harm others without remorse, when they refuse to take responsibility, they are already setting themselves up for their own downfall. And when that moment comes, when the truth is no longer avoidable, they will realize something. No amount of power, no amount of money, no amount of manipulation can protect them from reality. The truth does not need permission to be known. It does not need validation to exist. And once it stands fully in the open, they will have no choice but to face it. And that right there is justice. Not just in their downfall, but in the simple, undeniable fact that what they tried so hard to keep hidden has finally come to light. There's something remarkable about the way life works, about the way justice unfolds, about the way people inevitably face the consequences of their actions. But here's where things take an unexpected turn. Even in the midst of their downfall, even when the weight of their choices presses down on them, there is still an opportunity, a door, often ignored, but always present, a chance to turn around. Because the purpose of justice isn't just destruction. It isn't simply about making sure those who have done wrong suffer for what they've done. If that were the case, the story would end there, with exposure, with setbacks, with the loss of everything they once held dear. But life isn't just about punishment. It's also about transformation. And here's what many people fail to realize. The moments of crisis, the unraveling, the painful exposure of their own wrongdoing, these aren't just consequences. They are invitations. Invitations to wake up, to stop running, to face the truth, not just in the eyes of others, but within themselves. Because as long as they keep fighting against reality, as long as they cling to pride and self-justification, the suffering will continue. The weight of it all will crush them. But if in that moment they choose to acknowledge what they've done, if they truly see the damage they've caused, if they stop blaming the world and start taking responsibility, that's where real change begins. It's rare, but it happens. Some people, when confronted with the collapse of their own deception, finally see clearly for the first time. They realize that the path they were walking wasn't leading them where they thought it would, and in that moment they have a choice. They can continue resisting, digging themselves deeper into denial, or they can step into something greater. They can own what they've done, seek to make things right, and begin again, not as who they were, but as who they were meant to be. When you've been wronged, when you've been hurt by someone who seemed to walk away without consequence, it's easy to focus on them, on their downfall, on whether justice will catch up, on whether they'll ever feel what you felt. But that's not where your energy belongs. Because while life is dealing with them, something even more important is happening. You are growing. Pain has a way of refining people. It strips away illusions, forces clarity, and demands strength. It teaches you who you are, what you can endure, and what truly matters. And though you didn't ask for the hardship, though you wouldn't have chosen the betrayal, it has shaped you. The person you are now is wiser, stronger, more discerning. You see people more clearly. You recognize red flags you once ignored. You trust yourself in ways you never did before. And while they are caught in the consequences of their own actions, you are being protected from further harm. What looked like a loss was actually a shield. That relationship ending, that door closing, that person walking away, it wasn't rejection, it was redirection. It was life pulling you out of a space that would have destroyed you had you stayed. And while they are unraveling, you are rising. That's the real victory, not that they fall, but that you rise. That you come out of this not bitter, not broken, but better. that their actions don't define you, that their choices don't imprison you, that their wrongs don't shape your future. You are not bound by what they did. You are free. And that freedom is more powerful than any justice you could witness. You see, life has a way of balancing the scales. Not always in the way we expect, not always in the timing we desire, but in the way that ultimately matters. Those who hurt you, those who acted without conscience, without integrity, without care for the consequences, they will face what they have sown. Whether through restlessness, loss of peace, unexpected obstacles, exposure, or the heavy weight of accountability, they will come to understand that no one outruns the truth. No one escapes justice forever. But the real story here isn't about them. It's about you. Because while they are caught in the storm of their own making, you are being refined. You are being protected, strengthened, and positioned for something greater. Their actions may have wounded you, but they did not define you. If anything, they became the very fire that forged you into someone wiser, stronger, more unshakable. And as life deals with them, your only task is to keep moving forward. Not in anger, not in resentment, but in growth. Because the greatest justice is not simply in watching them fall, it's in knowing that despite everything, you have risen.